The first time Officer Daniel Reed noticed the kitten, he honestly thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was just after sunrise on the edge of town, when the streets still looked sleepy and the air felt clean enough to taste. Daniel was parked near a quiet service road behind a strip of warehouses, one of those areas that never made the tourist maps, but always collected the strangest calls. Dumping, trespassing, stolen pallets, suspicious vehicles. He'd been halfway through his coffee when something small darted across the asphalt. At first it looked like a squirrel, fast, low to the ground, disappearing into the weeds, but then it stopped, turned, and stared straight at him. Daniel set his cup down slowly. It wasn't a squirrel. It was a tiny bobcat kitten, too small to be alone, too small to be brave, and yet it stood there in the thin morning light like it had been waiting for him. Its ears were oversized and pointed, its legs wobbly and too long for its little body. The fur was spotted and fluffy, with faint dark stripes on the front legs. Its eyes were a cloudy blue-gray that didn't match the sharpness of its stare. Daniel rolled down the window a few inches, expecting it to bolt. It didn't. Instead, the kitten took a few careful steps closer, head low, nose twitching, and let out a sound that made Daniel's chest tighten. Not quite a meow, more like a thin, raspy call, needy and urgent, like a question it couldn't stop asking. "You've got to be kidding me," Daniel muttered. He opened the door and stepped out. The gravel crunched under his boots, loud in the quiet. The kitten flinched, backed up 2 steps, then stopped again. And just like that, it started walking away. Slowly, deliberately, glancing back every second as if to say, "Follow me." Daniel had been on the force long enough to know this rule. Wildlife and humans don't mix, and wild babies alone usually meant something had gone badly wrong. Still, instinct kicked in. He crouched and spoke softly. "Hey, hey, little one, where's your mom?" The kitten answered with another raspy cry and continued toward the weeds. Daniel looked around. No cars, no people. Nothing but the fence line, the weeds, and the long stretch of dirt that led toward a dry creek bed. He radioed dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Reed. I've got a bobcat kitten approaching me near Industrial and Route 6. Looks under 2 months. Acting strange." There was a pause. Then, "Say again? A bobcat kitten?" "I know. I'm looking at it right now." He could already imagine the jokes at roll call. "Animal control en route," dispatch said, trying not to sound amused. ETA 20. Daniel looked at the kitten again. 20 minutes might be too long if this kitten was in trouble. Because the kitten wasn't acting curious. It was acting desperate. The kitten reached the edge of the weed line and stopped beside a small break in the fence, where someone had cut the wire and bent it back. It squeezed through like it had done it before, then turned and stared at Daniel again. Its small body trembled. Not from cold, Daniel realized, but from strain, exhaustion, something else. The kitten let out a sharper cry and pawed at the dirt. Daniel's stomach sank. "No," he whispered. "What are you trying to show me?" He walked closer, careful not to step too fast, careful not to corner it. The kitten retreated through the fence, then sat on the other side like it was impatient. Daniel exhaled and made a decision he wasn't supposed to make. He bent the wire wider with his gloved hands and stepped through. On the other side, the ground dropped into a shallow ditch that ran parallel to the road. The ditch led to a dry creek bed, mostly dust and stones now, with scattered trash caught in the brush like souvenirs of careless humans. The kitten moved ahead of him, not running, but not stopping either. Daniel followed, and the entire time the kitten kept glancing back, checking him, making sure he stayed close. He'd never seen anything like it. Wild animals didn't guide people. They didn't recruit help. Unless they had no other choice. They reached the creek bed a minute later. The kitten hurried toward a patch of thick brush under the shade of an overhang of roots and exposed soil, then stopped and began crying again, louder now. Daniel stepped forward, crouched, and pushed the branches aside with one hand. The smell hit him first. Metallic, sour, wrong. Then he saw the movement, and his blood ran cold. A larger bobcat, an adult female, was lying partly on her side, half hidden by brush. Her fur was dusty and matted near her shoulder. One hind leg was bent at a strange angle. Her chest rose and fell shallowly. She was alive. Barely. Daniel froze. His hand stayed on the branches, not wanting to move too much, not wanting to scare her into wasting energy she didn't have. The kitten pressed against Daniel's boot and cried again, short, frantic bursts, then shoved its face into the mother's fur, licking at her cheek. The mother didn't lift her head. Daniel's throat went dry. He had responded to brutal scenes before. Wrecks, overdoses, violence. But something about this was worse because it was quiet, because it was helpless, because the kitten was trying so hard, and it had found him. He pulled his radio up with shaking hands. "Dispatch," he said, voice suddenly serious in a way that erased any earlier humor. "Update, I found the mother, adult bobcat female. Injured, possibly hit by a vehicle or caught in wire. She's in the creek bed behind the warehouses. I need animal control and a wildlife rehab team ASAP." "Copy," dispatch replied instantly, tone changing. "Units are being rerouted. Stay with the animal. Do not approach." Daniel looked at the mother, looked at the kitten. He was already too close. Daniel took off his jacket slowly and spread it on the ground a few feet away, creating a barrier between the mother and the open air. He wasn't touching her, just trying to shield her from wind and sun. The kitten didn't leave his side. It climbed onto the jacket, then back down, then pressed against his shin again, as if it needed to feel something solid. Daniel swallowed hard. "It's okay," he whispered. "You did good. You did the right thing." The kitten stared up at him, eyes wide, and for a moment Daniel could swear it understood. Minutes passed like hours. The mother's breathing was shallow. Her eyes were open but dull. She tried once, just once, to lift her head when the kitten cried, and then she sank back down. Daniel's hands curled into fists. He felt anger at the faceless thing that had hurt her. A car, a trap, a fence, a human. It didn't matter. It was always the same result. Wildlife paying for the messes of the world around it. He kept watching the mother's chest. In, out, in, out. Then he noticed something else. The mother's flank moved, not with breath, with a small, rhythmic twitch. Daniel leaned closer, still not touching, eyes narrowing, and then he saw it. Under the mother's belly, barely visible in shadow, was a second kitten, smaller than the first, almost hidden. It wasn't moving much at all. Daniel's heart slammed. "Come on," he whispered, panic rising. "No, no, no!" The first kitten darted under the mother and began licking and nudging the smaller one, calling softly. It had been trying to get help not just for its mother, but for its sibling too. Daniel's voice broke when he spoke into the radio again. "Dispatch, there's at least one more kitten under her. Possibly two total. One looks weak. We need them here now." "We're 5 minutes out," dispatch said. 5 minutes. Daniel stared at that weak little kitten and felt like 5 minutes was a lifetime. When animal control arrived, the lead officer, an older woman named Carla, took one look at the scene and her expression hardened. "Jesus," she breathed. Okay, we do this fast." A wildlife rehab volunteer arrived behind her with a carrier, gloves, and a thick towel. They moved calmly, practiced. No sudden movements, no loud voices. But the first kitten, the brave one, wouldn't back off. It stood between them and the mother, hissing in tiny, powerless bursts. Carla paused and looked at Daniel. It won't leave her. Daniel swallowed. It came to me. It led me here. Carla blinked, then shook her head like she didn't want to believe it. Well, that's something. The volunteer spoke softly. We'll take them together. We'll keep them in sight of each other. That's the best chance. They used the towel to gently cover the mother, reducing stress. Carla secured her with careful hands and slid her into a larger crate. The first kitten resisted until the last second, then jumped in after her like it refused to be separated. Daniel watched, stunned, as the kitten curled instantly against the mother's side, pressing its face into her fur. The volunteer reached under the mother's belly and found the smaller kitten. It barely cried when lifted, too weak. They wrapped it warmly and placed it in the crate, too, close enough for the mother to smell. Carla latched the door and looked at Daniel. You want to ride behind us? She asked. Daniel didn't even hesitate. Yes. At the Wildlife Rehab Center, the air smelled like disinfectant and hay. The staff moved with quiet urgency, an organized kind of panic. The mother was sedated and examined. Pelvic injury, deep lacerations, severe dehydration, likely hit by a vehicle and crawled into the creek bed to hide. Daniel stood behind a glass window, hands on the ledge, watching them work. He wasn't supposed to be there. This wasn't his job, but he couldn't leave. A rehab vet stepped out after what felt like forever and wiped sweat from her forehead. You're the officer who found them? Daniel nodded, throat tight. Is she going to make it? The vet's expression softened. We're trying. The injuries are serious, but we've seen miracles. And the kittens? The older one is dehydrated but strong, she said. The smaller one is critical. If we can stabilize him, they both have a chance. Daniel swallowed hard. The older one, he led me to them. The vet paused and looked back through the window, where the kitten was pacing inside a temporary enclosure, crying whenever it couldn't see the mother. That doesn't surprise me, she said quietly. Bobcats are smart, and babies. They'll do anything to keep their family alive. Hours later, the vet came back. Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. She's alive, the vet said. Barely, but she's stable for now. She's on fluids and pain management. We stitched what we could. Now we wait. Daniel's lungs finally released the breath he'd been holding all day. And the smaller kitten? He asked. The vet hesitated. He's still hanging on. We're warming him, giving glucose, tiny amounts of formula. It'll be a long night. Daniel nodded, trying to steady himself. He didn't leave. He stayed through the evening, long after his shift ended, sitting in a plastic chair in a hallway that hummed with fluorescent lights. Every so often, he heard the older kitten's cry, a thin sound that cut through everything. Near midnight, the vet returned again. This time, she was smiling. The little one nursed, she said. Daniel blinked. What? The weak kitten finally took formula. Just a bit, but that's huge. Daniel's eyes burned, and he looked away quickly like he was embarrassed to feel it that hard. The vet tilted her head. You okay? Daniel exhaled. I've seen people give up on each other faster than that kitten gave up on its mom. The vet nodded slowly. Animals don't have pride the way we do. They just have love and survival. Over the next week, Daniel came back every day. At first, he told himself it was just to check on the case, to write the report properly. But the truth was, he needed to know. He needed to see the kitten again, the one that had walked straight up to a police officer and decided somehow that this human was the only chance it had. The staff started calling the kitten Shadow because it followed everyone like a tiny ghost, especially Daniel whenever he was allowed in the viewing area. Shadow would pace and cry until Daniel appeared, and then it would calm down, sitting near the glass as if monitoring him back. The mother bobcat, named Sierra, remained in medical care longer. Her injuries were extensive. Some days she improved. Some days she didn't. But the kittens thrived. The smaller one gained strength, and the older one never stopped checking on him, grooming him, curling around him, blocking him from cold drafts. One afternoon, Daniel watched Shadow climb over the smaller kitten, press its face against his, and purr, loud, vibrating, determined. Daniel smiled despite himself. "You're a tough little cop," he whispered. "You did the whole rescue." The rehab tech beside him laughed softly. "Honestly? Yeah, he did." Months later, when Sierra was healthy enough to be transferred to a larger facility for long-term rehab, Daniel was there for the move. Shadow and his sibling were placed in a separate enclosure designed for bobcat juveniles. Minimal human contact, natural hunting practice, trees and platforms, and hidden dens. The goal was always the same: keep them wild, set them free. Daniel understood that. He respected it. Still, when Shadow was moved into the new enclosure, he did something that made every staff member stop. He turned. He looked straight at Daniel, and he gave a single, soft chuff, the sound he'd made the first day in the creek bed, as if to say, "We made it." Then he disappeared into the brush like a shadow returning to its home. Daniel stood there for a long moment, watching the empty space where the kitten had been, feeling something shift inside him. He'd worn a badge for years. He'd helped people in danger. He'd pulled strangers out of wrecks. But he had never been chosen like that. Never been followed like that. Never been trusted by a wild creature that had every reason to fear humans, and still decided to ask one for help. And that was the part nobody expected. Not the rescue, not the survival, but the fact that the smallest, wildest life in the whole story had looked at a police officer and thought, you can fix this." And because Daniel followed, it did.